Welcome back to another episode of the Taiwanology podcast. This is your host, Liu Kwangyin from CommonWealth magazine in Taiwan. You might have noticed that this is an emergency pod. It's a deviation from our usual monthly publication. Why are we doing this? Because I think the time honestly calls for it. The quarantine has begun. That's the warning from Ray Powell, the retired U.S. Air Force colonel who now runs Stanford's Sea Light Project, tracking gray zone activity of China at sea. He told CommonWealth that China's actions now show a quarantine of Taiwan is already underway. In his words, the first silent chain no longer exists. This June, that warning took shape. 4 Chinese government vessels left Xiamen port and sailed into waters east of Taiwan, a territory China Coast Guard has never operated in before. They radioed a Singapore-flagged Evergreen ship. By July, Beijing wasn't calling this an isolated operation. It started calling it routine. This is a decade-long pattern of China using its Coast Guard, not its Navy, to assert control over disputed waters, one incursion at a time. This isn't about Taiwan anymore. It's about whether the rest of the world quietly comes to accept China's law enforcement as the new baseline in these waters around the First Island chain. All of you can read all about this in the cover story Broken Chain, published by CommonWealth magazine early August, where we collected over 1.8 billion vessel data points over the past 2 years to visualize the encroachment. For us, this is honestly not a new story. CommonWealth magazine has been tracking this pressure campaign for years. In 2024, we documented China Coast Guard activity around Jinmen, and last year, we built a dashboard tracking PLA activity around Taiwan, which is updated every single day. This year, we went even further. We are partnering with the CSIS Futures Lab to analyze years of vessel data and sending a reporter to the ground in Suao, which is eastern Taiwan, one of Taiwan's most strategically important ports, to talk to the people living alongside this pressure campaign. Joined by 2 people who built this story, Stephen, our data scientist behind the vessel tracking analysis, and Hazel, the reporter who interviewed fishermen, Coast Guard officers, analysts, and we also had the pleasure of having an exclusive interview with Taiwan's National Security Council Secretary General Joseph Wu. Welcome to the studio today, folks.
Hi, I'm Hazel, and thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Steven, and I work on this data side of this story.
Okay. I'm really, really happy to have both of you here. So we are here to talk about what has the story revealed about China's ambition and what can Taiwan and its first silent chain allies do about this. First of all, Stephen and Hazel, I would like you to share in one sentence, what's the most shocking discovery for you?
For me, the biggest discovery was realizing that what looked like is isolated incidents were actually part of the same long-term pattern across the first island chain.
Right. So this is not just one location, it's regional.
Right.
Right. Okay. And how about you, Hazel?
For me, the biggest shock for me is that in our interview, those on the front line told us that Chinese Coast Guard harassment is pretty much part of their daily life, from our own fishermen and Coast Guard to the Japanese and Philippine Coast Guard.
Right. So I remember you shared with us a fisherman's observation. I think he said that it's been going on for almost 10 years, right? He would see the Chinese Coast Guard ships on the sea every single day. So let's start with that. So Hazel, you went to Suao Port on the northeastern corner of Taiwan, and I was told that it's quite an important port. Tell us about that.
What makes Suao Port so unique is that it's actually 3-in-1 port, and it handles military, commercial, and fishing operation all at once. And it's where the Navy base is biggest destroyer, and it play a huge role in Taiwan's domestic shipbuilding program. And in fact, Longde, one of Taiwan's top 3 shipbuilder, has its main shipyard right here. On top of that, the local fishermen's association told us there are around 700 fishing boats operating out of this port. And now experts also point out its strategic value. One expert just told us its fighting ever breaks out along Taiwan's west coast, Suao could become a main East Coast entry point for U.S. support.
Right, because it's on the east side, which would allegedly be safe.
Yes. And also, just Taiwan is conducting its annual Hanguang military exercise. As part of the drills, the Taiwan's Coast Guard and Navy complete a joint operation escort commercial cargo ship carrying critical strategic supplies safely into Suao Port and Hualien Port during their first live fire joint anti-blockade escort exercise. So Suao Port is super important for Taiwan's security.
So you're saying that Suao Port on the east coast would be maybe very crucial to lifeline in the case of a blockade or a quarantine situation. And I also understand that you spend some time with the local fishermen in Suao. What do they think about these encounters with Chinese Coast Guard?
Okay, may I just give a realistic scenario for our audience? So when I aboard the young captain's boat, Longde shipyard was right beside us. And as he showed us how the radar and AIS work, he told us that since 2022, seeing Chinese military drills along with government ships from China, Japan, and Taiwan all in the same water, so basically become a new normal for him. And having fished out here for 8 years, he put this way. At first, fishermen would still turn on their radar out of curiosity to look for them. But over the last 2 years, everyone just completely gone numb to it. And it is quite important because geographically, the Diaoyu-tai, known as Japan as Senkaku Island, sits about 100 nautical miles north of Suao Port. The area around Diaoyu-tai is one of his go-to fishing spots. And he recalled one trip near Diaoyu-tai Island where he experienced his firsthand. In the dead of night, he ran into a Taiwanese Navy, and by near morning, as he was fishing about the 3 nautical miles outside the islands, a vessel from the Fisher Agency of Japan pulled up, and barring a warning broadcast, the ship just circled his boat to take a photo and then send a drone to do a false web right above him. So this water around here have pretty tense for a long time. Just nearby are the Diaoyu-tai Island, and as Japan calls them. And ever since Japan's nationalized the island back to the 2012, and China has been sending its Coast Guard ship to patrol the area almost every single day.
Right, so it looks like the areas near Suao is already pretty contentious, and they are very important fishing grounds for the fishermen of Yilan County. And according to what you described, it sounds like it's an area where that is disputed. So the Japanese Coast Guard, the Taiwan Coast Guard, and now the Chinese Coast Guards are there almost every single day. So my next question will be for our data engineer, Stephen. So I kept hearing this daunting number, 1.8 billion data points. Can you walk us through the raw materials here? What did you do?
Actually, we mainly work with 2 types of data. One is AIS, Automatic Identification System.
What is it?
Yeah, I know.
In layman's language.
Yeah, okay. I usually describe it as a flight radar for vessels.
A flight radar.
Yeah, flight radar for vessels. So because it tells us where the vessel is and when it was there. Yeah, so the second is the public information released by governments such as Taiwan Coast Guard, Japan's Coast Guard, and Philippine Coast Guard. And we collect things like press release and law enforcement records and official announcement, so we can get the vessel list from government information.
So all this is open source.
Yeah, all this is open source. So we combine these two data together. On one hand, we had the huge AIS database containing every kind of vessel you can imagine, like fishing boat and oil tanker, and everything was mixed together. So we need a list to find out the China Coast Guard. It's just like you want to find something on Google, you need to type a keyword. So the list of the China Coast Guard is a keyword we need to find in the database.
Right. And how did you compile the list of Chinese Coast Guard vessels?
Actually, in this time, we use a lot of AI tools in this, but we are not directly to generate the list from AI. We ask AI to how to make our more efficient to collect the list.
Yeah. So with the help of AI, it's like we have extra two Stevens who are working alongside us, right?
Yeah,
Make it more efficient.
Yeah, but I want to also mention that there's a lot of work also went into the data cleaning part, because AIS isn't perfect. So some ships turn off the transponders, so you can find it on the ocean, and sometimes the data contains obvious errors. So for example, I find a ship like suddenly jump hundreds of kilometers just in few minutes. Yeah, so that's almost certain a data problem rather than a real movement. And sometimes we also see a Coast Guard ship suddenly appear inside Taiwanese forbidden water. Yeah, so in those cases, we check news report and official announcement to see whether there really was an incident or just like a data error stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that really sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
So Stephen, how long have you been with CommonWealth magazine?
Maybe 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you, as a data engineer, you could be making millions at Meta or Google or other data mining or finance companies. Why did you become a data engineer working at a media company?
Actually, my major is finance. Yeah, so but I have get a data analysis program in my university. So in the data analysis, there's one part is called data visualization. Yeah, I'm fascinated about the data visualization. So in that time, I just think, are there any job in Taiwan just do the data visualization stuff? And I found there's a lot of foreign media do a visual story like that, like New York Times or Washington Post and the Straits Times from Singapore. Yeah, so I saw that my previous company, the Newslands, hired a data journalist, and I just applied, and I'm very lucky to get that job. And
Right. We're very lucky to have you. I
Thank
should
you.
say that. Right. Yeah. And back to you, Hazel. We talked about the observations coming from the fishermen. What is it like to talk to the Taiwan Coast Guard officers who are actually intercepting these vessels? What's their day-to-day looking like?
Basically, Taiwan's Coast Guard officials just told us they handles Chinese Coast Guard ship as a new normal and a daily practice as well. And they have a very strict one-on-one escort SOP. So they basically need to following the Chinese Coast Guard all the way and broadcasting loud and clear that Taiwan is exercising its law enforcement rights in our own water and making sure that both Chinese Coast Guard vessels and commercial ships near to hear the voices and the messages. It is so important for us. And at the same time, the Ocean Affairs Council is setting up an information center to keep the commercial ship update on the situation change in the Taiwan Strait and the old water around Taiwan, helping them to avoid unnecessary panic.
Right. So we have talked to a lot of Coast Guard officers and also an official at the Ocean Affairs Council. How are they describing the evolution, or let's say the increasing encroachment from the Chinese vessels. How has their behavior evolved over the past few years?
Basically, from Taiwan's perspective, the more assertive or more routine are both right description for us. And our experts just told us that they point out the China's mirroring its playbook from the South China Sea, East China Sea, and the Kinmen playbook to the Eastern Water. And we have interviewed the officer from Philippine, Ray Powell, and he told us
he is the spokesperson of the Philippines Coast Guard.
Yeah, right. And he just told us that the same playbook and the same model is seen everywhere. And at the end of the interview, he also just just told us that Taiwan need to put more attention on it, trying to secure our water security, or we might see what's happening in Philippine Sea will happening in Taiwan too.
Right. So it looks like China Coast Guard is really testing all kinds of tactics around the first island chain, and those tactics would be replicated to other places. And very soon, with the salami slicing strategy going on, I think the greatest danger is that, like you said, the fishermen, they have become pretty numb to what's happening. Right. And well, there was an exclusive interview that we did together, which was the interview with Joseph Wu Zhaoxie. He is the Secretary General of the National Security Council. And to my knowledge, really, this is his first ever interview with a local Taiwanese media outlet. So I really think this is pretty remarkable. What was it like, Hazel, to interview Joseph Wu? What's your takeaway?
Actually, it is very first time I met him, and I just basically sitting and listening the whole interview and knowing more about what Taiwanese on Taiwan's National Security Council to thinking about this issue. And it is a very new thing for us because everyone just talking about the quarantine scenario and blockade scenario back to 2024. So we need to come up with a whole government approach to deal with it. So it is very interesting experience for me.
And what's his most important message that you recall?
Like we need to build more cooperation in the whole government. So different agencies, so different government officials need to work together to deal with, and we need to cooperate with our allies like US and Japan and Philippines as well. So we need to work more closely. And we need to send the right message and what we're seeing in the front line, what we're thinking about the security, and what we can play more reliable actor in this whole region to maintain the whole maritime security or the freedom of navigation. It is really important for all of the world.
Right. Stephen, what's your takeaway?
Actually, that is my first time entering into the office of the president.
Presidential office.
Yeah. So this is a very fresh experience for me, and I'm a little bit nervous in that time. So I show Josepher or
yes, Secretary General Joseph Wu.
I showed Josepher our first island chain heat map. Yeah, the reason I show that map because it takes most of my time to do that. Yeah, and I really want to show him is because I want to check if this makes sense to him.
And what did he say?
Yeah, he said it really makes sense, and he said we are doing a good job. But for open source intelligence, this is a limitation of the open source intelligence. I don't know if we can talk about it later. Yeah, he said that he talked with us about in the west of the Philippine Sea, they also have a China Coast Guard here, but we map wasn't show.
Okay, we didn't have that data.
Yeah, because there is like part of data is just
it's classified or
just can't get from the open source intelligence.
Right, I see. Yeah. So Yeah, but I should say that I was very proud of that interview because Stephen was really a good sport. He was basically jumping in front of Mr. Wu, showing him the heat map, and I could tell that he was super impressed. But then I really think this is probably the ceiling of open source intelligence, and I expect more collaboration, maybe with the government agencies. So I would also say that my takeaway from that interview was it's a grave warning by Mr. Wu because he said that the greatest risk is people growing used to it. They don't think there's anything unusual with China's actions. So if people feel that way, if people stop protesting, if people stop talking about it, then that's the greatest risk because that means this will all be normalized. And so I think that's why we did this cover story and this podcast. Okay, back to you, Hazel. We also spoke with Ray Powell of the Sea Light Project, which is a maritime information transparency initiative. Does he see this as a Taiwan problem, or does he see this encroachment part of a broader test of the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific?
Exactly. It can just break down to the two level. At the tactical level, we can see that China just treated the three waters, South China Sea and East China Sea, and waters around Taiwan as an experiment lab. So what's happening in one spot will happening in the next spot. So it is very, very related issue to the whole airline, and also the ship and the vessels come through this water will be impacted. So it is a world issue we need to concerning. And at the strategic level, China will not stop within the first island chain. And they just want to break the first island chain even to the second island chain because their ambition is to become maritime superpower to challenge U.S. power within this Western Pacific and the whole Indo-Pacific. So we can see U.S. trying to go back to the Indo-Pacific. They're just deploy more ship and they just trying to build up their EDCA in Philippines, and they just like invite and Korea shipbuild yard here. And so this is whole strategy. It is so different compared to the past 2 years.
Sorry, what's EDCA?
EDCA is a cooperation framework between US and Philippines. They have an agreement to do things like a military exercise and military location in Philippines. So this is a very important thing we can see in the past 2 years.
Yeah. So I think with the Chinese Coast Guard's increased activities, we're seeing in response, the countries along the first island chain are partnering up and we are upping our cooperation. Right. So also a first for us is that this time we formed a partnership with CSIS, Futures Lab. So I also interviewed online the researcher Jose Macias. So I believe that there's some modeling data that we shared with one another. Stephen, what can you tell me about this collaboration?
Actually, I had known about Jose's work long before we started this story. And it started one day during our team meetings. My colleague Ashley shared a CSIS Futures Lab report called The Geometry of Coercion. It's talking about Taiwan about the PLA and China Coast Guard around Taiwan. And by using the quantitative method, statistical method to solve the geometry problem.
What do you mean? What did that report track?
Yeah, they track all of the China Coast Guard around Taiwan.
In the past, how many years?
In the past 5 years. Yeah, so that's why we want to collaborate with CSIS because they have the historical AIS data in that part. Because the historical AIS data is very expensive.
Oh.
Yeah, they have some donor and let them can pull the data like that. Yeah, so I sent a message unlinking to Jose and talk about what we want to do and send him our previous story. And so he just responded the message very immediately. Yeah, so we can get more cooperate stuff and in this part, yeah.
Right. So, folks, if you check the print version of CommonWealth magazine, or if you go on the website to see broken chain story, you could see the visualization, a very beautiful visualization of the CSIS Futures Lab data points. And that's wonderful collaboration between Stephen and Jose. So congrats on that. And not to give you too much pressure, but I'm just curious, what would you be tracking next? Give us a flavor.
Okay, I think the next question I'm most excited about is actually maritime Malaysia.
What is that?
Yeah, the idea actually comes from China's military exercise last year. And during the exercise, Taiwan MND, Ministry of National Defense, said there were signs that Malaysia vessels were involved. But that immediately made me wonder whether we could actually identify those vessels in the data, in our AIS data. So right now we can check China Coast Guard with a reasonable level of confidence, but Malaysia is much harder. And many of those vessels look just like ordinary fishing boats. So unlike Coast Guard, you can't simply identify them from public information or AIS alone. So AIS alone usually isn't enough. We have to combine it with many other sources before we can confidently identify those militia vessels. So it's much more difficult identification problem than checking the China Coast Guard.
Right. So another huge challenge coming up, which I'm looking forward to reading. So finally, Hazel, is there anything you would like to share with us? You've done so much reporting on this. What's your main takeaway?
There is one keyword we need to retake is that transparency is so important. So like open source information, we can collaborate with different experts, we can cooperate with different officials from the whole world, so we can just like put it together to take a spotlight on what China's doing in the different waters, so we can cooperate more well before. Yeah, so this is the key takeaway for me.
Right. Thank you, Hazel. And thank you, Stephen, for coming to the studio. I'm really proud of this work. And I should say that, well, like Hazel said, this team effort and all of the discoveries we've made, it's not just because of open source intelligence, but the involvement of human effort. And I think the most important lesson is that the real danger isn't just a single incident, but gradual normalization. It's the moment that these patrols stop looking unusual to Taiwanese and to the entire world. That's when the gravest danger lies. So all of you, thank you for listening to the show. You can read our full investigation, Broken Chain, China's Coast Guard and the Long Game of Isolating Taiwan on the CommonWealth English website under graphics. It also includes the full interactive vessel tracking data from our partnership with the CSIS Futures Lab. Follow Taiwanology wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.